Okay, last time we were talking about equivalent fractions, so here we're going to actually talk about adding fractions and some other things as well. Let's first of all review. Find three fractions that are equivalent to 3/4. That means they have the same value. They look different, but they have this, but they're actually have the same place in the adding fractions. Okay? Let's see. Let's ask the question here about fractions. How do you tell in general about a number which number is bigger, like 5 or 7? Well, you know 7 is bigger than 5, right? But what if you have negative numbers? How do you know which is bigger, -1 or -3? In terms of money, it seems to me I'd rather be $1 in debt than $3 in debt, wouldn't you? And the number line is a great way to understand the ordering of numbers. With the number line, we always say the bigger number lies to the right. So don't think about 0, don't think about positive or negative. Whenever you're comparing which number is bigger, ask yourself which one lies to the right. That's the bigger one, okay? So -1 is greater than -3 because it lies to the right of -3. This symbol means greater than, this symbol means less than, and this symbol means equal to. The way I like to keep it straight is just remember that symbol, the inequality symbol, always opens up to the bigger number. Always opens up to the bigger number. So here we go. We're supposed to make this into a true closed sentence by either putting greater than, less than, or equal to. -2 blank -4. Well, -2 is here, -4 is there. What I just said is -2 is greater than -4, so the symbol has to open up to the -2, okay? How about this, 5/9 or 7/9? Well, I don't really want to try to mark those on the number line, but since the denominators are the same, isn't it true? If the denominators are the same, you just have to look at the numerators. 5 is less than 7, therefore 5/9 is less than 7/9, right? Okay, let's keep on going. Well, before we start adding fractions, let's ask this question. We're still doing the open sentences. Greater than or less than? It might not be obvious here. Boy, it sure would be nice if we could make the denominators the same, wouldn't it? Huh. How would you make the, what would you choose? Would you choose 27 as the what's called the common denominator? Turns out 27 would be okay, but there's a smaller one. What's the least common denominator? What's the smallest denominator between 9 and 3? The answer is 9. So what you have to do is you actually would, this one's fine. You'd multiply top and bottom by 3, right? So this just becomes a 6/9 when you change this to an equivalent fraction. Remember, it has the same value as 2/3. So which is bigger, 6/9 or 5/9? The answer is 6/9 because since the denominators are the same, all you got to do is look at the numerators. How about this one? I want to compare these, and it helps to make the denominator the same. 24 would work. In fact, wouldn't the product of the two always work as your common denominator? But for many reasons, it's nice to find the smallest one. It just makes your work a little bit easier. There'll be less simplifying and everything. What is the least common denominator between 4 and 6? The smallest number that 6 goes into and 4 goes into is 12, right? Okay. So let's write them both over 12. What do you multiply 4 by to get 12? 3. So you got to multiply the top by 3. What do you multiply 6 by to get 12? 2. So you got to multiply the top by 2. So what's the answer? Is 9/12 greater than or less than 10/12? It's less than, because 9 is less than 10. And since these fractions are equivalent to these two, the same order works. Interesting, huh? All right, well, we'll give you some to try. Go ahead, hit the pause button and try these. Okay, so on the first one, what is the smallest number that 12 goes into and 6 goes into? Turns out it's 12. So let's use that as our least common denominator. If you just change this to an improper fraction, you get -17/12. You got to multiply 6 by 2, so you got to multiply -11 by 2. You get -22. So what's the answer? Be careful, these are negative. So -17/12 is actually bigger than -22/12, isn't it? Because -17 lies to the right of -22. On this one, let's see, our common denominator in this case, I'm afraid, is just going to have to be 20. So let's make them both 20. So you got to multiply top and bottom of this by 5. I think that gives you a 15 on the top. Multiply top and bottom by 4. I think that gives us 16. Isn't this getting exciting? It's really exciting. So what is it? Is 15/20 less than 16/20? The answer is yes, because 15 is less than 16. Okay, let's get back to adding some fractions now. If you add 1/4 plus 5/4, remember, you know what that is? You get 6/4. That's not too hard to see if you think about the number line. If you add 1/4 and then you move 5/4 more to the right, you end up at 6/4, right? And by the way, that can be reduced. Don't forget to reduce these. We just learned how to do that, so always look to reduce your answers. This is so simple, you could do this in your head, but let's just practice the skills we learned. Remember how to reduce a fraction? You factor, and then you can cancel the common factors because it forms a 1, right? As long as it's factored. So the answer would be 3/2. Sure is nice when the denominators are the same, and this is the rule that problem suggests. When you add two fractions with the denominator the same, you keep the denominator the same and add the numerators. Don't get it mixed up with multiplying, right? With multiplying, you multiply straight across. With adding, you keep the denominator the same and just add the numerators, as long as the denominators are the same. So that leads us to this question. Well, what if they're not the same? The answer is, make them the same. How do you make them the same? Well, it's the same idea. We're going to find what's called the least common denominator between 4 and 6. Turns out it's 12. And how do you write them both over 12? Well, this first one you got to multiply top and bottom by 3 to make the bottom of 12. The second one you got to multiply top and bottom by 2 to make the bottom of 12. So we get this. Now remember how you add them? When the denominators are the same, you keep the denominator the same, add the numerators, you get 19/12. That's your answer. Try to reduce it. Of course, you could write it as a mixed number, but remember, that isn't considered reduced. It's only considered reduced if the denominator is smaller. Writing it as 1 7/12 would have the same denominator, wouldn't it? Okay, so before we get back to the least common denominator, let's first define what's called the least common multiple. The least common multiple is really essentially the same thing as the least common denominator, although you're just talking about numbers. The least common multiple of a set of numbers is the smallest number that each number is a factor of or goes into evenly. So for example, the least common multiple of 4 and 6 is 12. Okay? Anyway, there's a way to find it. Typically on your homework you don't have to figure it out. You can just kind of look at it and tell. But let's say you didn't know what the least common multiple is. I'm trying to find a number that all three of these numbers go into evenly. In other words, all three of these are factors of. If you can't figure it out, then the way you can actually form the LCM is you factor each number separately. Okay. Then what you do to get the LCM, you build the LCM so it contains the number of factors whichever occurs the most. So what I'm saying is this. You see that there's 2 2's in this first one, no 2's here, and 2 2's here. This has 2 2's, this has no 2's, this has 2 2's. You only need the number of 2's that occurs in the most. You don't need 4, you just need whichever has the most, okay? Let's talk about 3's now. This has 1 3, this has 2 3's, this has no 3's. Which one has the most? This one does. So then you put 2 3's. This has no 5's. These each have 1 5. So how many 5's do you need? Just 1. So this you've built this number as chintzy and as frugally as possible, so it just barely contains each of these numbers as factors. What is this number anyway? Well, let's see. 15 times 3 is 45. What's 45 times 4? It's 180. It's a big number, but still, it might be hard to figure that out. But that's how you do it. Let's do another one. The way you find the LCM of a set of numbers, it's the smallest number that each of these goes into, is you factor each number separately, and then you use each factor the number of times it occurs the most. So this first one has 1 2, no 2's, 2 2's, so you need 2 factors of 2. Second, then let's see, it has this one has no 3's, 1 3, 1 3, so you only need 1 3, you don't need 2. These each have 1 5, this has no 5's, so you just need 1 5. Now in terms of the variables, you treat them the same way. They each have 1 x. So how many x's do you need? Just 1. This has a y. None of the other ones do, so you just need a y. And then the last one has a z, so you got to have a z. So again, you built this number just so it barely contains each of these numbers as factors. So what is that number? Let's see, 4 times 15. 4 times 15, is that 60? 60xyz, that's right. Yeah, That's the LCM. Now, let's get back to the LCD for a second. The least common denominator is the least common multiple. The only reason why we give it a different name is when you use the phrase least common denominator, you're talking about fractions, okay? So for example, let's go back up here. We say 12 is the least common multiple of 4 and 6. We also say 12 is the least common denominator of 3/4 and 5/6. You got it? Just kind of a semantic thing, actually. Let's do a few more, then I'll give you some to try. We're gonna go over this. We're gonna do this on a lot of the other problem sets, so don't think we're just doing it here. Let's add these together. This is a subtraction problem. I would just change to additive form. Okay. Remember, minus means plus and negative. Now, the least common denominator between 8 and 12 is 24. So you're gonna multiply the 8 by 3. You got to multiply the 5 by 3 also. So that gives us 15, right? To make this a 24, you got to multiply the bottom by 2. You better multiply the top by 2 also, so you get negative 14. So what's the answer? When you add those together, now that the denominators are the same, you get 1 over 24. Make sure you write the whole problem down in each step. Let's change this to additive form. What's the least common denominator between 4, 12, and 9? Let's see. I think it's 36, isn't it? Yeah, 36. So you multiply this on top and bottom by 9 to get 36. This on top and bottom by 3, and this on top and bottom by 4 to get 36. So you get 45 over 36 plus negative 21 over 36 plus 8. When you add all those up, what do you end up with? Let's see, we get 53 plus negative 21. Is it 32? Let me double check that. Yeah, 53 plus negative 21 is 32. I think we can reduce that, can't we? Let's factor this. 32 is 8 times 2. 8 times 4, so it's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. 36 is 9 times 4, so it's 3 times 3 times 2 times 2. A couple of 2's cancel. Final answer would be 8 over 9. There you go. See? All right, well, why don't you try these, and we'll go over these in just a minute. Okay, here we go. So you factor each of them, right? And you use each factor the number of times it occurs the most. So I get you need 2 2's, 1 3, and 1 5, which is 60. This one's a little harder. Let's see. For this one, I get you need 2 2's, because this one has 2 2's, 2 3's, because this one has 2 3's, a 5, and then an A and a B. That comes up to be 180 AB. That's pretty big. Okay, on these last ones, to subtract, you change to additive form. Also, I changed this to improper, okay? Now the LCD here is 24. Seems like it's 24 quite a bit around here on these problems I chose. So to get 24, don't you have to multiply this on top and bottom by 2, this on top and bottom by 3? So this becomes what? 34. This becomes negative, what do we got there? Negative 57, I think. Check me on that. So when you add those together, you get negative 23. I get negative 20. Yeah, that's right. Negative 23 over 24, which cannot be reduced, but always try to reduce your answer, okay? Last one. This is a 3/8, by the way, in case you can't see that. So when you change to additive form, you get this. The common denominator, it's 24 again. Look at that. So you're going to have to multiply this on top and bottom by 6, this on top and bottom by 2, this on top and bottom by 3. So what happens? This becomes 30 over 24. This becomes negative 14. I think this becomes 9. So when you add all those up, I think you get, let's see, 39 plus negative 14 is 25, I think. Yeah, 25 over 24. Which again, you can't reduce that. You could write it as a mixed number, but remember that's not considered reduced. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.